Morning, Ollie. It's very hot, but do you know what else is hot right now?
I'm going to guess OpenAI's leaked financial figures.
Yeah,
I got it
yeah,
right?
yeah. Well, what an intro that was.
Well, just to toot our own horn here, Duncan, we've been saying it's unsustainable for ages, and have repeatedly said, "Got OpenAI going to run out of money quite quick, aren't we?" And yeah, turns out pretty close to the truth, I reckon. Were you surprised to find out they were losing billions? Because there were a lot of takes that are just like, "What shock losses at OpenAI?" I
Yeah,
was like, I
no,
don't think shock losses.
no. I think that's. I mean, it's been the technology playbook for years. Like, if you've been interested in Meta and how much they've spent on the metaverse, people will be like, $2 billion in losses over however many years. I mean, this is a lot bigger than that, right? But the playbook is to spend money to make money, but you've got to make money. You've got to know that you're going to make money.
The interesting to put out a couple of the interesting things that everyone's looking at the big number, just like, oh, what a tremendous loss. Oh, blimey. But if you look at revenue and cost of revenue in the data, this was the most surprising thing for me. It was like, oh, it could be sustainable then. It could be. So 13.1 billion in revenue, the cost of that revenue 7.5 billion, and a lot of the analysts are saying, well, the cost of inference is going low, and we would expect an improvement there, right? Which is I thought surprising. I thought, as is the case with a lot of companies like this, revenue would be 13 billion and the cost of getting that would be 14 billion, which of course is a signal that's massively unsustainable. So I thought that was noteworthy.
Mm.
I then went through it, and this will upset you, Duncan, and probably many of our listeners. The biggest expenses, R&D, 19.2 billion. A lot of that's flowing into Microsoft, according to assessments. So renting their chips, their data centers to train new models.
Yeah.
And here's my thought experiment. Because we talk about this a lot. When's good enough? And actually, if OpenAI said, "Well, we are where we are. This will do. We're not going to look at anything else." Right? There's a couple of reasons they can't do that. So they've committed to a lot of the capital investment. So they would really struggle to be like, "Oh, those data centers you're building. Don't worry about them. Actually,
We're
guys,
quite happy with where
it."
we are. Yeah.
Yeah, and obviously, of course, the competitive argument is, well, everyone else would catch up. And cheaper guys would catch up, open source guys would catch up, and OpenAI would eventually, therefore, be kicked out of the party. But as an interesting thought, because in our last news podcast, and you have ideas on this, being the tech guy, we talked about improvements seem negligible.
Well, improvements do seem negligible to the average user. I would argue, and I think this is
I'm
like
a below average user. So I probably
what you're trying to achieve with it, like the writing, I mean, arguably is actually getting worse. The coding quality for difficult coding problems, difficult reasoning problems, it's at the bleeding edge. Things are getting better, but for broad level adoption, I think the point is that you've got models at a certain capability of where they are now, like. We're not really making good use of the technical capability that we have at the moment. So there is an argument to say, right, let's focus on getting value out of what we've got before we start to spend loads more money on R&D to just make it better and incrementally better and incrementally better. That lots of people who are working in that kind of messy middle don't really care about broadly. And maybe that's part of the reason why Mr. Dario Anthropic said, "Oh, do you know what? We should actually stop now, because they need to start making that money, and they have a capable product. But this competition between them is like pushing them higher and higher, and pushing them to spend more money, which is unsustainable."
Well, and how much more money is there, I suppose, at this burn rate? So there are calculations. Some people have said, based on a financial deal that they did at the start, which I think gave them something like 600 billion, if they carry on at this rate, which seems unlikely because it's increasing, costs are increasing, and the gap's increasing, but they could carry on for about another 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
Right, which is a long time,
We got a lot of more podcasts to do in 4 or 5 years, blimey.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. We need to be dishing on these guys for much longer. Yeah, otherwise what would we do?
Yeah. Yeah, but like the cost breakdown, we were speaking about this just before we started the podcast. In fact, it's the reason why we said, let's do a podcast. But the actual breakdown of those costs, sorry about Ollie's dogs, everyone.
They just agree with everything you say. You notice they're dead quiet when I'm making an interesting point. Uninterested. You're just like, we've got to talk about the cost. And they're like, yeah, we do.
But so So the breakdown, you said one thing which made me think a lot of different thoughts, which was, you tell me.
I say a lot of things, so you tell me.
All right. It was the marketing cost.
Sure. Yeah.
Like how much was it? 7 billion?
5.7 billion.
5.7.
It's increased 418% since last year.
Right. So obviously this is just like a competitive pressures thing. They want to be on top. And some of the language around these tools about and stories about, replacing all white collar work, wiping out the labour market, and people would speak about it in terms of like weapons, like this is the new Manhattan Project and so on and so forth. If you were truly building a nuclear bomb, you probably wouldn't need to spend that much on marketing. So it just shows that there's a lot of work to do here, and some of the narratives that they come up with, look at what they're doing, not what they're saying. If you look at what they're doing, you realize how much work is going into around these models, let alone producing them, but around them and figuring out what to do with them. They're spending so much money, there's so much work. What is being said sometimes doesn't add up.
I really enjoy the idea that, are you in the market for a world-ending bomb? Then look no further than the Manhattan
But that's
Project.
how they talk about it, right?
It's true,
like,
yeah.
It's Fallout style,
Yeah, do you need to market? I mean, so digging into the numbers a bit more in the sales and marketing piece, a lot of that I suspect will be in sales, because these guys are desperate to break the enterprise market, which is a hard sell. You have to get in there. People who understand the industry, understand the regulatory environment, all sorts of other things, and they're highly priced, and it's also a very expensive activity. And what that tells to me is that a lot of the SaaS apocalypse stuff is, dare I say it, and we have commented on this before, probably a bit because what if you really wanted to sell into enterprise, which is where a lot of this is targeted, a lot of the ads are targeted. They're not targeted at consumers. They've won the consumer market. It is where it is. OpenAI has just become, to chat GPT something, like to Google something, means you've kind of won.
Sort of, but didn't their market share drop below 50% for the first time recently?
So that's, it's a good point, but I don't think additional marketing spend will stop that unless you did a massive billboard campaign. It's like, we're not actually as evil as people think.
But they are doing that. But that's the funny thing. So
okay.
Your point about enterprise is much more valid than this. But they are doing Super Bowl ads and, doing black and white pictures like a lovely married couple between Sam Altman and Johnny Ive. You know what I mean? It's like there's a whole bunch of PR and sort of AI washing that's having a lot of money spent on it. So yeah, but I think your point about enterprises is more pertinent to the large costs.
Like cloud went through this moment, which was where a lot of the hyperscalers said, well, we'll do our own sales engine and we'll do our own enterprise services. And then they realized, actually, that's not the operating or business model we need to pursue, and it will not be profitable for us. We should go to the heavies, the IT services folks, the SIs, the consultancies, because they already have relationships. And it's going to be much cheaper for them to sell into those organizations and market into those organizations, then do all the plumbing and other good stuff that they want to do, rather than us doing it. And I wonder if that's a point we'll hit soon. But to your one, I mean, we, in our last news podcast, the one we last watched, we talked about Pepsi and Coke, right? And how their marketing spend, but they didn't gain any more market share. And there are some estimated Anthropic financials, and they're spending about 3.8 billion on sales and marketing as well. And they're, from a much smaller base, their revenues are much lower, and their business is much lower. So that arms race could be quite damaging, bearing in mind sales and marketing is close to cost of revenue. So the cost of actually delivering the product. If you scaled back on that, you'd be doing much better, I think.
Can they scale back on it and then still achieve what they want to achieve? Are we just going to keep fighting against each other to the end of the world, to the apocalypse? Not the SaaS apocalypse, but the actual apocalypse.
I would kind of suggest they probably don't have a choice but to scale back on some of this stuff. So I mean, look, if you had to, I mean, and remember they're trying to IPO soon. Both of these guys are trying to IPO soon. If I was interested and I saw this, I'd be like, hang on, this is pretty challenging, because these companies aren't that new. That's the other thing we forget, and it's a reminder we keep making. There was a post on LinkedIn which I liked. So if you followed me, you would see it in your feed too. That's how LinkedIn works. And they made the point of just like, you have to keep reminding yourself, AI isn't moving fast. And it isn't.
I saw that.
It isn't
Maybe
moving
it
fast.
popped up because you
I
liked it. But it was one of the very rare LinkedIn posts that I saw, and I was like, do you know what? That's true. That's really true. Like, what is fundamentally different? And this goes back to what I just said earlier on. Like, what is fundamentally different about your AI strategy a year and a half ago even to what it is now? Probably nothing. Those new models being released actually don't move the needle, consultancy speak, but they don't fundamentally change what your AI strategy is, because the capability that you're using within them isn't changed by these frontier releases, is my view. So, but if you get caught up in the discussions and I hate the word hype now because everybody says it, but if you get caught up in all the media buzz and sales and marketing that is produced around this, you would think that you need to. Do you know what I mean? And maybe that's the answer.
In one of the landmark studies we did, we made that point, and this was right in the early days. We were like, all of these things could happen over the next 10-year timeline, and in a special section, like, here's why they probably won't. Here's what inertia looks like. Here's why we struggle. And I think that's borne fruit, because if you look at where we are in that 10-year timeline, technical capability aside, not a tremendous amount has happened, really. Yeah. There hasn't been a jobs apocalypse, although we keep talking about it. You'd be led to believe there is one, but look at the macro stats, and it's not really true. But just quickly back to the numbers, because the R&D point I think is interesting. We wrote a piece a little while ago, which was, if OpenAI sneezes, the world catches a cold, I think, or the economy catches a cold. That R&D, given how much it is, and is likely a similar chunk of money for Anthropic and all these other guys in the arms race, is attached to a ton of capital spending and a lot of contracts over the next 10 years. And if that becomes unsustainable, i.e. we can no longer afford to spend 20 billion when we're only earning 13 billion.
House of Cards collapses.
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
And what I would suggest, given where a lot of the benefactors are, is that one of these guys, won't name names, goes bust and says we can't meet our obligations, and that has a ripple effect on absolutely everyone else.
So that's the thing to worry about, not the jobs apocalypse or the SaaS apocalypse or any other apocalypse.
Hey, look, I'll do it one more time. One of our big points right at the start when we were talking about the jobs apocalypse was the dodgy geopolitical environment and challenging macroeconomic environment are far more likely to cause you issues than AI ever would. And actually, if AI can deliver even a fraction of the productivity gains, that's actually a good thing. So flagging productivity in the global economy is the reason life sucks right now for a lot of people. It hasn't grown, life hasn't improved. So actually, I'm all for some of those productivity gains. However, the fact that they're not manifesting is far more likely to cause a problem than them manifesting and rendering you unemployed.
All right. Okay. We're going to leave it there. Nice quick one. We're going to do more of these quick videos, more of these quick podcasts. But thanks, Ollie. Next time, we'll be talking about whatever has happened within the past 24 hours. So see you then. Say bye,
everyone. And say goodbye to my dogs. Thanks, dogs, for those insights.